Definition of a nigga like me. And I don't care if you don't like me, well that's good. Call me T-A-Y, whatever. I ain't tripping on you niggas, man. Say whatever, I'm good. I ain't through the hood and I'm going on good. Chillin' with your girl and she say I look good. Talk a lot of money at you homies like, what they talking about? Nigga, I'm good. Really, I'm good, nigga, I'm good. Tell 'em I'm good, nigga, I'm good. Really, I'm good. What they talking about? Just give me a mic and I cut these niggas open like canned goods. Eat they ass up like everything in the can good. I like to bluff, you don't know if my hand good. Niggas talking tough like they don't know if my hand good. Driving like a pilot but don't know how to land good. Falling like a horse before they learn how to stand good. I've never been to jail here, I know how to plan good. My whole team get rings even if they ain't playing good. People follow me like everything that I'm saying good. I hang with OTG like I don't understand good. I hit you in the cheek, cause they say that your shit ain't good. Every time that I swing, I'm a joke that it land good. I never been a farmer, so I don't know if my land good. But it gotta be cause what I got in my hand good. Yeah, I go to AC, even though the fan good. Boy, I stay in Texas, it's hot in the hood, but I'm good. That's the definition of a nigga like me. And I don't care if you don't like me, well that's good. Call me T-A-Y, whatever. I ain't tripping shit, I'm ballin'. I can buy whatever, I'm good. I'm good, I ain't going on good. Chillin' with your girl and she say I look good. Talk a lot of money at you boys like, I don't care what they talking about. My money, I'm trippin' on that pool. Come off in my city and you would call me took a walk. See, I got that pool. Plus rolled up lit, smelling like shit, kind of manure. Triple D, I ain't $30 coming straight up out the store. I eat till I get full, and even though I ain't ate, I can take the cornbread or whatever else on the plate, but I'd rather just take the date. I can show that hoe a good time. Bitch, I'm blowing kush, so don't be rolling up no good time. That's to say I roll blood slower than to show good times. Even been on the earth, niggas can't compare to a good rhyme, but they so trying, and I wish that they would. I'm eating beats in my sleep, all my haters wish that they could. Niggas say they won't beat, when I come and get it, it's good. I smoke the rap off a tree, make me treat a nigga like good. Niggas don't understand the wish that they up like good. Did everything that I can and got everything that I could. Good. That's the definition of a nigga like T. Hey, why, yeah, that's me, and I'm good. Call me T-A-Y, whatever. I ain't tripping on you niggas, man. All right. Welcome to Paradigm Shift TV 314. This is your brother, DMG the Poet, aka Brother Pianki. And we got an all-star Christian apologist panel led by my brother, the Conscious Christian Jerome Green. And they are here to challenge a couple of things that have been laid out by the so-called conscious community. Before my brothers get into their spiel, let me do that song do go hard, don't it, bro? Let me do my usual greeting. Let me say hotep to my Kemetic brothers and sisters. Let me say God bless to my Christian brothers and sisters. Let me say assalamu alaikum to my brothers and sisters in the NOI. Let me say Islam to my Moorish brothers and sisters. Let me say peace to my brothers and sisters in the nation of gods and earth, them 5%ers. Let me say what's up to my atheist brothers and sisters. Let me say what's up to my Apple brothers and sisters. I still ain't thought of a proper word to say to y'all, but I'm gonna figure it out sooner or later. And finally, let me say Jumbo to the rest of my brothers and sisters throughout the African diaspora, be it here in the wilderness of the United States of America or beyond. Y'all know why I say that greeting. It's because if you Black, I'm with you, and I hope that you with me. Our different ideologies should not keep us from uniting, and we can have unity without uniformity, and we can disagree without being disrespectfully disagreeable. With that being said, my brother Jerome Green, the panel is yours, my friend. Y'all do what y'all do.
All right, man. First of all, I want to say it's always good to return to Paradigm Shift TV 314. I'm excited to have my brother Thomas White and my brother B Wash on the panel with me. I want to say peace to the chat. You know what I'm saying? Oh, Teddy, man, don't start there, bro. Don't start that because you know I'll go in about the Ravens. But but yeah, man. We on here tonight, man, just to kind of address some things that the conscious community holds to. And even from my experience, man, even being in the conscious community, there are some things that you know they stood on that it don't really reflect what they projecting as being so-called Afrocentric, man. So we gonna dig into a couple of points, a couple of talking points, and we gonna give our spiel.
Word.
My brother Thomas White, what's up, bro?
Peace, bros. What's going on? It's definitely good to be back on here one more time. Appreciate you, brothers, having me on. I got my little one over here crying, so don't mind him. But peace to the chat. Ready to have this dialogue. This will be dope.
And last but certainly not least, my brother B Wash. What's the word?
Oh man, the bird is a word. Nah, I'm just playing. Nah, peace to the chat, peace to the family. Glad to be in. Hope y'all who is off today, um, are taking advantage of a good afternoon into evening into night. Hope you got your rest, chilling with your family. I know I've been doing the same, so just peace to everybody.
All right, all right. And if y'all wondering what the noise is, the brother actually doing us a favor. He actually out at the park with his family, so y'all bear with us. And like I say, we real people who do real things. Like brother Domo had his baby in the background. I got a lot of feedback on that. It was hard to hear. It was like, okay, well, this ain't the channel for you, because around here people have actual real lives where we deal with real issues and actually have families that sometimes gonna interact while we doing these shows. So if that ain't something you can deal with, you on the wrong channel. That being said, we lost Thomas, but I'm sure he'll be back in. I agree with Teddy. The Ravens are trash, except for my brother, the quarterback. Hope he get his money. That being said, that wasn't a shot, Jerome. That wasn't a shot, I promise. All right, family. I'm gonna jump off. Y'all go ahead and rock out. Oh, well, real quick, before I jump off, let me posit this question just to kick it off. Why does it what's the reason, or what's at the root, I would ask y'all, of what I see around the conscious community, even a little bit with the Israelite community, to where they seem to believe our ancestors, meaning our direct ancestors here in the United States, North America, etc., were unintelligent, in that they feel that they somehow were hoodwinked and bamboozled into believing in Christianity, versus them being smart enough, intelligent enough, and following this belief on their own, and being able to make a conscious decision to see what this enslaver was doing versus what the biblical narrative said a Christian was supposed to be. What is the issue, or what's at the root of that, what I find to be disrespectful of our ancestors, in that we seem to believe they somehow were dumb or were duped into this belief. I'm gonna let y'all rock out on that note.
Okay. Well, I guess I'll go first. From my experience with, formerly being in the conscious community and, subsequently leaving and having conversations with those who are still in the conscious community. Honestly, I think with the average conscious community member, they they have a proclivity towards following rhetoric, right? Because when they say things like, our ancestors, you know, were duped into Christianity, they were indoctrinated and things like that, and they try to downplay the critical thinking skills of our ancestors. That is due to a lack of insight into the writings of our ancestors, either during chattel slavery here in America or during the time where Christianity first entered into Africa and they were introduced to the gospel. Because according to them, in what they say in their writings, there was no deception, no indoctrination, none of that. You know what I'm saying? It was just they freely accepted the gospel upon examination of what it was. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, some of our brothers and sisters seem to be oblivious of that fact, that it wasn't it wasn't a result of any type of indoctrination or anything like that. It was first of all, when you look at the fact that even during chattel slavery, our ancestors knew the difference between what the white enslaver was projecting and what biblical Christianity actually is. That in and of itself should show you that, there was no duping, there was no indoctrination involved. Our ancestors were smart enough to know the difference. You know what I'm saying? So, I'm gonna pass it on to either Thomas or B. Wash, whoever wants to go next.
Yeah, bro. So, man, I think another narrative that's also spun is the forcing, right? Basically being forced to become Christians, and I think like, man, I think like you still have an issue. I think you still have an issue there because you still have this long history of of slaves being Christians throughout not only the history of slavery, but then once being freed, you still have generations after that where people still by choice are Christians. And so I'd like to I know B Wash is in here, so I know he is I know he's got African history down, he's got it down, but like I'd like to hear him talk about if and I know Dr. Bantu is also uncovering some things with West Africans and slavery from that aspect. So but I definitely think that like history tells the truth, and those narratives that were left by our ancestors, enslaved, freed, that basically show them choosing Christianity. That tells me that there was no duping, but also just the fact that it's not, they didn't leave their brains on the shores of Africa. You know what I mean? So when they were loaded up as cargo, like their brains were still intact, still having an ability to think, still having the ability to make decisions for themselves. And that process of thinking continued long after they hit the shores here. And then they would continue thinking for many generations. And so I'm definitely with you, bro. I don't think there was a duping. I don't think there was a forcing. And I think that as we begin to uncover and think about what history shows us in regards to even when some masters would essentially free their slaves upon their death by baptism, like I think you do have to ask the question: was that Was that by choice, or are they just trying to get out of a system? You know what I mean? One could argue one of those things, and I think like it's good to bring out history, but the question is what was the legacy that was left after those baptisms? Did they continue on in the faith? I think that history shows that many did. But I think that history tells a whole different story than what us new people coming into consciousness and wokeness think about our ancestors and their mindsets while enslaved.
All right. Yeah. To continue on, we talking about our ancestors, our immediate ancestors here, on this continent. I think the main thing is that there is a disdain and hatred for white people via white supremacy. And because amongst white Americans, the professed, and I use that word in quotation marks, the professed religion of the majority of white Americans, since they stepped onto these shores, was Christianity. They would use their perception of how the religion should operate as a justified means to the atrocities committed to stolen Africans and indigenous natives here. But it's kind of funny with the oxymoron of being conscious of being woke or being awakened, is that oftentimes we aren't awakened to our own ancestors, meaning that for the longest we let a certain narrative about black people and Christianity be pervaded and portrayed by the dominant society. But all the while, both during slavery and immediately after slavery, we have written down statements, autobiographies, people taking biographies, people taking notes from what these slaves said about what it was like. And we see overwhelmingly, and again, not every single one, you will find cases where some people may have been beaten into at least nominally being a Christian, or they may have thought it was advantageous for them to become a Christian to get some type of leg up in society. So I won't say every single one, but overwhelmingly, you see slaves, or those enslaved to be more accurate, consciously learning about this faith tradition. And as they begin to learn about it, they see aspects that what the so-called majority or enslaver or overseer or whatever you want to call it, their religious expression was not congruent with what the faith narrative taught. And you see over and over instances like the invisible institution, plush harbors, preserving a lot of West African, what we title voodoo, which is the expression of how one has their religiosity being show forth in their self-professed Christianity. They had a mindset. They knew exactly what was right and what was wrong. So for them, the religion of the slave master was a false religion. And if you fast forward even today, globally, you see most Christians, at about 2.4 billion globally, they look into the peculiar institution, which is slavery in the United States, and they vehemently condemn and say this was not inducative and true to the Christian faith. And in fact, they say those who are most authentic to the Christian faith, who had little to no training, who very seldom could not read the Bible, definitely those who could did not have proper hermeneutics and exegesis, Yet they understood the faith more, abundantly more, than the people who supposedly had all the tools. And so we need not, again, this is a historical lesson. This isn't, a conviction to say, oh, this is going to make you convert or deconvert from where you're from. No, this is just putting right back with right so that people understand that our ancestors were not duped. We can't say they were duped on one hand and then say, oh, but we built this nation on our backs and on our minds and on our hands and stuff like that. Those two things don't go together. And if we only just take a step back to listen to what they had to say and why, we could begin to have a real conversation about what was true, what was not true, and the path that our ancestors on this continent laid forth, especially within the black community, and how even to this day, and I'll close here for this segment, for me, even to this day, uh, black Christians, particularly black churches, are still the number one target of the oppressive society, whether it be individualized in our communities or whether it be in our churches. So again, that must mean that there's a false Jesus and a real Jesus going around with two different groups, especially in those early enslaved days that was being professed. And it's up to us to see, okay, who had the real Jesus and who professed the false Jesus.
Hey, Byron, can you unpack that a bit about, some of the uh, some of the atrocities that were taken up by so-called Christians on black churches?
Oh yeah, I mean we're talking about that even back to the days of Richard Allen and Absalom Jones when the reason why they had to walk out because the people didn't want to serve them. And actually, even after they began to start their own church, they had opposition of people trying to financially stranglehold the church. And then you go into the deeper South, you see black churches being bombed and burned. You see black people having crosses being burned in front of their homes, in front of their establishments. You still see even into the 1960s these things going on. Thinking about the bombing in Alabama, which killed the little girls. But of course, there's other documented atrocities and oftentimes a lot of undocumented. For me, I live in the deep South, and a lot of times these things are known within our community that don't necessarily get recorded in the local newspaper in the past. That people just held on to live in memory and said, oh, you know what happened to so-and-so church back in the day. Them white folks, them Klansmen or Nazis came and tried to do X, Y, Z. So, these attacks, even up to the Dylan Roofs of the world. He went to AME church. He's going into a black church. The Buffalo shooting earlier this year. The majority of those people were members of a local church in the black community. So it happens continuously over and over, these atrocities. I would tell people, go and read, we talk about Tulsa as an example, go and read what a lot of the white church leaders in Tulsa had to say about why it was necessary, or why that Greenwood had to be burned down. And these are pastors, these are priests, these are preachers, and these people are saying, well, these Negroes didn't know their place. They didn't know X, Y, Z. They need to do this. They need to do that. I'm talking about and we're talking about Tulsa, which a lot of us only recently learned more about within the last 5 to 7 years. And again, these people professing a false Jesus, a false Christianity to our ancestors, both during slavery and after slavery. And again, I'm not saying everyone, because we know there were staunch abolitionists, white abolitionists as well. But let it not be known that it was black Christians who vehemently oppose the system, who brought it down to these knees, and have been fighting on our side.
B-Watch, I think you in the wind a little bit too far, bro.
Oh, my bad. I said they've been fighting ever since.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, they've been fighting this thing since the beginning. With no quarter. And again, this is not a way for me to say that somebody needs to convert or deconvert, but I think we just need to have honest conversations and give respect to our ancestors that they consciously made decisions. They knew exactly where the line of demarcation was. And the verification of that is that in lands that knew not anything about American chattel slavery or the transatlantic slave trade, when they saw what had happened here for 500 years, and they still see what's happening today, people all the way in Iran and Iraq and the Balkans and all over the world say, man, the black Christians in America were the actual true ones, and the oppressive society was false. They were not representative of Christianity.
Yeah. So, 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 so it sounds like overall, it sounds like we're saying that our ancestors didn't adopt the same religion of their masters. And so, like, I hope you guys hear that, because I think it's one thing to say, hey, they took what their masters gave them, which you could argue that the about the slave Bible that was missing, Exodus and all these things in all these books and pages. But I think that when you look at how the when you look at how the enslaved, how our ancestors approached Christianity, how they approached their thoughts about the Bible and freedom, and how they ended up coming to the conclusion different from their masters, but also I would say being compelled to desire their own freedom and the freedom of others, and to fight for that um, through escaping, through legislation, through many different ways. Uh, like, to me, that doesn't speak of ignorant, stupid, duped black people. But again, it tells me that they didn't check their brains at the shores, and they passed down um, a legacy of of faith, uh, and also intellect with that faith to their offspring in order to use to essentially get us free. And then um, that would lead to civil rights movements. That would lead to um, many different actions taken by us in order to combat racism, um, and even to this day, right? That has led to the black church doing the most in our communities, and then people coming alongside it and still saying, "What is the black church doing?" um, and I think it's out of the hatred of our ancestors that we disrespect the black church. We disrespect the decisions of our ancestors to follow Jesus, um, and in the history of our people in general. Um, so I got a question just in regards to the black church. Like, how do you guys see the black church? Is it a response to slavery and racism? Is it a response to um, uh, a totally different religion of the slave masters? How do you guys view that?
But before I answer that, Thomas, I want to touch on or piggyback off a point you made.
Oh, yeah.
So this was one of the this is one of the, like the turning points for me when it came to like the conscious community and what they were really about when it came to our ancestors, right? Because what I would see, and you know, this just bolsters what we're talking about, but what I would see is that when it came to, you know, prominent Black historical figures like Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Marcus Garvey, and others, they would totally disregard the works and the sacrifices of those three. I mean, and others, but I'm just using those three as examples. But they would totally disregard the works and the sacrifices of those three individuals because of their spiritual orientation. And so that's when I started paying attention, even though I was still in the conscious community. You know, I was still referring to myself as conscious, Afrocentric, you know, and things of that nature. I started really paying attention because I'm like, you don't have to agree with their spiritual tradition or their spiritual orientation, but you can't just throw away their contributions to the Black community. Like, you can't throw all of that away just because you don't agree with the religion that they follow. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, it's just crazy. It's crazy to me that they take that stance because they feel like, you know, they have the truth, and you know, Malcolm, Martin, and Marcus Garvey, you know, they were deceived into, you know, being a Christian, or deceived into being, you know, Muslim or whatever. And you know, we beyond that. You know, we got the truth. They had a lie. You know what I'm saying? Which is literally what one of them actually said. But you know, like I said, that's when I started paying attention, because it's like, you know, I mean, what exactly are you doing in regards to the Black community? Like, what sacrifices are you making in regards to the Black community? How are you trying to liberate and push our people forward? Like, you sitting behind a keyboard trying to talk down on Malcolm, Martin, and Marcus Garvey, but you haven't done one thing, you know, to even that even comes close to what they did, you know. So, you know, I wanted to bring that out. But as far as the Black church, from what I know, the Black church is pretty much a polemic against white supremacy. I mean, even going back to the invisible institution, it was a polemic against white supremacy and chattel slavery, one of the earliest forms of that. And in more contemporary time, well, throughout the history of the Black church, the progress of the Black community was, you know, pretty much on the shoulders of the Black church. The Black church was the foundation of the fight against white supremacy. And you know, a lot of these groups that constitute the conscious community, I still don't see where they've done anything that even comes close to what the Black church has done historically and what they're still doing today.
Yeah. It's good.
Thomas, what's your question again? Rephrase. Say it again.
So I was just simply, you know, is the Black church, is it a result of racism? Is it a result, you know, of just in general being a different religion than the slave masters?
Well, I would definitely say it's definitely a result of racism. I should say a response to racism, because that's like the underlying sin that has that infiltrated those who purported to have the church. I would also say that the Black church is countercultural, which is one of the defining aspects of Christianity, being countercultural. And then lastly, I would say, yes, it is a different, not different religion than Christianity, but a different religion than those who purported to be quote unquote Christians and enforced on African slaves. I mean, I don't know how many times I hear people, you know, bring up, you know, Well, the paper bull said X, Y, Z. So what you got to say to that? I said nothing. I think it's paper bull, bull doo doo. Like it's false. Like just because I think there's an instance out there that people believe just because a European was a pope, priest, pastor, had a church, made some declaration that oh see that's Christianity. Okay, no, it's false. Like we're saying, and what our ancestors were saying. So we're not even saying something new. Our ancestors were saying this is false. This is incorrect. And so oftentimes we give them the narrative to say, well, they just took what they had and had to work with it. But I think it's more like they created something totally different. Like bake me a cake and put a drop of poison in it, no matter how you dress it up, how you clean it up, etc., this cake still got poison in it. Like there's no making the best out of poison. But what our ancestors did, instead of trying to make the best out of this poison cake, maybe just getting the icing off and whatever, they said, no, we're gonna look at the ingredients of the cake, we're gonna examine it, and we're going to create our own cake just without the poison. Like we see what a poison is, we're gonna create it without it. So instead of, sorry about this background. But instead of this idea that they just made the best out of the situation, they just came on through. They didn't have no other option. No, they said they had different options. Our ancestors said as such, and they said no. We believe this faith tradition is true by and large because it's in line with the spiritual aspects that their ancestors carried with them across those ships. Mind you, that's a whole different discussion because a lot of people are ignorant to the spirituality of our ancestors in Africa that came and what they brought over with them. And so they looked at that, they looked at the trueness of Christianity, and they saw congruency. And overwhelmingly, again, they saw that what the white oppressors were doing was exceedingly false, right? Without any education, without any seminary, etc., they said it was false. And again, it's not my words. This ain't Byron words. This is our ancestors' own words out their mouths. You can go and read it for yourself. Oh, my bad. I'm done.
Okay. Yeah, that was a great breakdown, bro. Um, and I hope for those that are listening that you kind of taking heed to what we're saying, because there's a lot of misconceptions and misinformation being disseminated because we living in the internet age, and we have these devices in our pocket where we can, we have access to a ton of different things. You know what I'm saying? Almost instantly. And so, when it comes to our ancestors and uh, if they weren't already Christian before they got here, how they became Christian or how they came to the faith, even in addition to what has already been said about what they expressed in their own words, they also made it known that their conversion stories, what I'm saying, were independent of even a white slave master even being around, much less forcing it on them or forcing them to convert. Their conversion stories were deeply personal stories. You know what I'm saying? And again, we're not saying that there weren't instances where a slave master might have forced, a slave to become Christian or be converted. That did happen on a small scale, but like D. Wash was saying earlier, overwhelmingly their conversions and their conversion stories were independent of any type of coercion and independent of any influence by a slave owner or a slave master. So, you know, you know.
Yeah. And Jerome, I think like, just in general, when you even look at the history of the legality of owning Christians, and the problem that BK brought that up, and I know BK can talk to it real well, but he's done a couple of lives on that, just speaking to, the fact that, owning Christians was illegal. You know what I mean? But it was on the books. So they had changed the laws. You know what I mean? And so when you take that into consideration, there isn't going to be a lot of forcing people to become Christians, because you would then have to set them free at that particular period of time before they, like I said, change laws and everything like that. So, I think like that's something we got to consider as well. And I think like everybody thinks that, well, not everybody, but there are some who think that, every slave master was a Christian. You know what I mean? Definitely not the case as well. You know what I'm saying? There were atheists. You know what I mean? There's people who just believe differently. So I think we can't apply like one solution, one size fits all scenario when it comes to the experiences of our ancestors, because there were many different experiences to happen throughout that history. And I think,
well, let me add something too, like, because there's a few, since we're knocking down some arguments, there's a few things we got to knock down. One, right? The idea that America was founded as a Christian nation, like, that was not true. It was founded by a bunch of deists that some were Christian, but it was not founded as a Christian nation. In fact, many of those who were the founding, quote unquote, founding fathers of the nation were essentially heterodox from, the European forms, whether it be Anglicanism and other aspects. So we have to take that into consideration too. That again, it's not a Christian nation. It's a deistic nation, but not a Christian nation. Two, can we, because what happens in these arguments or conversations, let me not say arguments, because you get, oh, well, if your ancestors are Christian, but let's break down what happened. You think the Exodus was real? It's like, wait, hold on, those are two different conversations. Like, whether or not the Exodus was real or not is not a factor in saying why our ancestors converted. Like, those that's a different conversation that we can have. But if you start with, well, these slave masters was beating this into our ancestors, and this white man invented Christianity XYZ, and Constantine XYZ, and then you refute that, and then they say, okay, so you try to tell me that you believe in talking snakes and a donkey, and our ancestors believe that? Well, our ancestors converted to this faith tradition, so they believed it to be true. But again, you cannot move the goalposts from arguing that the reason that you are against Christianity because you think it's a white supremacist, white man's tool of oppression, and then when the conversation is rebutted, then you go to, okay, well, let's look at your Bible and let's look up why Second Kings says this, and why does Genesis say this, and the Exodus didn't happen. You can't find this, you can't find that. It's like, well, hold on, those are two different conversations. Because your initial point is to say, your initial reason is based off of Black American and white American society in the 15, 16, 17, 1800s and beyond, particularly about Christianity. So once we fully establish of the reasons why our ancestors converted and some that didn't convert, right, then we can kind of bury that conversation. But then to jump from that conversation to a basically general Christian conversation, it's two different things. And we have to become better as a people of knowing not only our own history, but knowing own history in general. Because we argue on our side chats and barbershops and other stuff like that. But I promise you, if you go outside the veil and start to say some of this crazy stuff, people are going to dismiss you. Even if you got legitimate gripe, people are going to dismiss that because you're not being accurate with the information. Doesn't again accuracy of information does not mean to convert, right? It doesn't even mean you have to believe it to be true, but you have to be accurate with the information as it's laid forth, so you can give a reasonable understanding or a counterpunch to what is being presented to you. And oftentimes, what happens in these conversations is that you break this stuff down. We'll bring up, famous and sometimes non-famous narratives, and then the next question comes out is, well, Constantine being at the Council of Nicaea, or well, what you got to say about the Roman Catholic Church? They did X, Y, Z. The Anglican Church did this. It's like, well, let's start with the first things first. And let's get that established first forehand, and let's slow walk ourselves backwards and see where we landed.
Yes, sir.
Hey, brothers, real quick. So we got another distinguished guest who joined the panel, our brother BK Apologist. And before we get to him to chime in, I wanted to throw this out there. This question, I should say. When our brothers and sisters say Christianity was given to us by our enslavers, and BK, I know you can speak to this in depth, and I'm sure the rest of y'all can too. But get into, if you will, the facts about Christianity in West Africa, and the possibility or the fact that some of our ancestors believed in Christianity before they came over here on the slave ships, and how that sort of repositions this conversation about we got it from or our ancestors got it from the enslaver.
Oh, so you want me to jump into that?
Yes, sir.
Well, actually, what I wanted to speak on is, I mean, there's definitely proof of that. There's definitely proof of, various slaves from the Congo region that came over already had a understanding of Christianity. Now, it was Catholicism, right? And, we can have our disagreements about that particular theological framework, but they believed in the gospel prior from coming in here. But while they were here, of course, all of them were not from the Congo, but we know that the ancestors knew that what the plantation owners was trying to instill upon them was fugazi. And the reason why we know that, because we actually have the slave narratives, where the slaves themselves, the ancestors themselves, will tell you that what these guys were trying to give them was crazy. And if I can be allowed to share my screen, I could share a couple of quotes here, if that's possible.
Yes, sir.
All
Whenever
right,
you're ready.
cool. All right. So let's see here. All right. All right. So here's one. Let me see. Is it? I don't see it. You gotta display it. All right. Cool. All right. So here, this is from Adeline Cunningham, age 85, enslaved, Texas-born in slavery. This is from the Slave Narratives from the Federal Writers Project, 1936 to 1938. She says, "No, sir. We never goes to church. Times we sneaks in the woods and praise the Lord to make us free. Times when one of these slaves got happy and made a noise that they hear at the big house, and then the overseer came and whipped us because we prayed the Lord to set us free." So clearly they're doing something that the plantation owner did not want them to do, and that was praying to God, right? But here's another one. This is from Lit Young. He's enslaved in Mississippi and Texas. "She built a nice church with glass windows and a brass cupola for the blacks, and the yellow man, light-skinned black man, preached to us. She had him preach how we was to obey our master and missy if we want to go to heaven. But when she wasn't there, he came out with straight preaching from the Bible." Clearly, there was a distinction. They knew that, okay, they're making him say this particular message is propaganda. And when they left, they got down to brass tacks. All right. Here's another one from Claiborne Gatling, enslaved in Georgia. Before freedom, we always went to white churches on Sundays with passes, but they never mentioned God. They always taught us to be good niggas and mind our missus and masters. So they went to church and they never mentioned God, right? The ancestors understood what was going on here. They weren't being tricked. This is from Sarah Douglas, who was enslaved in Alabama. We went to the white folks' church, so we sit in the back on the floor. They allowed us to join their church whenever one got ready to join or felt that the Lord had forgiven them of their sins. We told our determination, this is what we said. I feel that the Lord has forgiven me for my sins. I've prayed and I feel that I am a better girl. I belong to Master so and so, and I am so old. The white preacher would then ask for Miss and Master what they thought about it, and they could see any change. They would get up and say, I notice she don't steal, and I notice she don't lie as much, and I notice she works better. Then they let us join. We served our mistress and master in slavery time and not God. They would get up and say, I notice you don't steal, and I notice you don't lie as much as I notice she works better. Then they'll let us join. Right? It had nothing to do with God. It was about behavior modification. And they knew that. Here's Margaret Nickerson, enslaved in Florida. We had church with the white preachers, and they told us to mind our masters and misses, and we would be saved. If not, they said we wouldn't. They never told us nothing about Jesus. So they're at these so-called places of worship. They're not hearing about God, and they're not hearing about Jesus. Here's another one. This one's kind of actually let me do this one. This one's from Bert Luster, enslaved in Tennessee. There was a lot of talk about conjure, but I didn't believe in it because them darkies could do anything to one another and have one another scared, but they couldn't conjure that overseer and stop him from beating them near to death. And I'll stop there. So it's the ancestors. These are the ancestors talking to us, letting us know that they saw the fugazi. They saw it. You know what I mean? So it's like so we only appreciate certain ancestors, the ancestors that corroborate what we believe now, or do we generally have love for the ancestors? Because these ancestors knew what was up. They knew that they were getting the flim flam. They knew. So that's it.
And that's what's up. And I don't know how you really get around what they say about themselves. And I feel like it's kind of whether you believe in Christianity or not, it's a little disrespectful to go to try to say something that goes against what they said about themselves. I ain't saying you got to believe in what they believed in, but I'm saying with regards to them drawing a line of demarcation between what these enslavers did and what they decided to do, it's obvious. With that being said, brothers, I got to take a ride, so I want y'all to continue to have a good show. I'll chime back in as soon as I can. BK, I appreciate you jumping in, bro.
No doubt.
Yeah. I wanted to answer a little bit what the question that he asked about the West African thing, because it seems like which is a good thing. It's coming up more and more about West African Christianity, and I know that BK touched on it even with the Congo, right? But even outside the Congo, there's more and more information. I know I've shared it on multiple platforms, and will continue to share it as I continue to grow and learn more in this. The evidence is showing that Christianity as a faith tradition entered into West Africa um, prior to the Portuguese, and it was through other Africans, whether it be the North Africans or whether it be Nubians. So again, it's not to say that all Christians were all or West Africans were Christian. It was definitely a minority, but it was there. And the question may come up: well, if they was Christian, why did the Europeans enslave them anyway? Well, you can make that same argument for the Congos, because the Congos are Christians. Why did the Europeans enslave them anyway? And even talking about the Congo, because people will say, well, they got converted by the Portuguese, right? They freely did convert because through missions. But there's a thing that happened between the Portuguese and the Congo that's not often talked about. In less of better words, they end up having beef. The Portuguese did not like the fact that the Congolese were expressing and giving uh, hermeneutics through a particular Congolese African worldview of the faith, because they were able to look at their indigenous traditions and say, oh, there's some things that we can equate and contextualize in our own traditions. The Portuguese did not like that. And often, as you can see in different letters, they complain to them about the fact that they were kidnapping Congolese Christians, and say, "Hey, you kidnapping our people, and we're supposed to have the same faith tradition, right?" So again, even with that up until when the slave trade really pops off, you see that tension starting. And again, there's evidence, and it should be evident, and it shouldn't surprise us that they are West African Christians prior to the slave trade. So all you have to do is doing research. People will say, "Well, why don't we know that? Why don't we know that?" Again, what's the motivation of the dominant society telling you that you may have had Christians already in West Africa beforehand, if their goal is to attempt to control your mind, body, and soul in the first place? Because they want to tell you that no, you never believed in this or heard of this before us, and that's simply just not true.
Man, listen, B Wash, Sutek said you made that up. um, but there's one thing that he said in there that I think that definitely needs to be addressed, and that's well, he said sacred. He said synchronization, but I think he meant syncretism. But talk about the difference between syncretism and just keeping with your traditions. Is there a difference?
Hold on, give me a second. I'm just stepping back in the house. Give me a second.
Jerome, you got anything on that?
Man, I think BY, he covered it pretty well. I can't I can't follow that up.
Yeah, well, I'm talking about addressing Sutek, talking about synchronized traditions. Was was there were the Christians were they practicing syncretism, or were they just keeping their own traditions and being Christian? Do you have to do away with your tradition? Because I look at that as almost um, a thing where a lot of people will look at and say that our ancestors, because they didn't look like white folks, not wearing suits to church and stuff like that, but that they kept aspects of their culture and their traditions while becoming Christians, that somehow that's not possible.
Oh yeah, yeah. There is, and I think there's a fundamental difference between cultural contextualization and syncretism, right?
Yeah.
And so that's almost like I'll use myself as an example, right? I incorporate the philosophy of Ubuntu, which is a universal African philosophy, with uh, how I express, Christianity.
Yeah.
Um, and I've had problems in churches that I was a member. Well, one church that I was a member of, because it wasn't an understood philosophy because it's not Western. You know what I'm saying? And so, um, that just shows you that when it comes to cultural contextualizations and cultural expressions of Christianity, the West feels as though they have a monopoly on not only the faith tradition in and of itself, but also the way the faith tradition is supposed to be expressed. And so anything that deviates from uh, the status quo as far as the expression is concerned is deemed, um, some might deem it as syncretism, you know. But they, in any sense, they look down on those particular expressions, even though some of those expressions actually predate the West even having Christianity, first of all, and this Western expression of Christianity that parades itself as this overarching universal expression.
All right, cool. Um, so it looks like Sutek said, "Don't mix my words up, fam." My bad if I mixed your words up. Can you better explain what you mean? How we mix your words up? Because if you were talking about it being synchronized as in, them being practiced, Christianity and African traditions being practiced at the same time, I think that B. Watch pretty much, you know, he stated that as he was speaking. But if you didn't mean syncretism, my bad. Uh, but I do think that's still worth the conversation because that still comes up with people as well.
Yeah, I would also say that you know, contextualization as a category is a category within syncretism because syncretism is very very vast. It's not just one thing, one size fits all kind of thing. You can have different forms of syncretism. Particularly in Christianity, it's pro contextualization, and so how did they view it? How did they express it? What true forms did they have? Um, and what was their kind of worldview, if you want to say that. And so you know, just because they rename some saints in African names, that's contextualization. That's not syncretism, or a different form of syncretism. Um, just because they understand, they make they make crosses and effigies and stuff like that, and expressions and dances in uniquely African forms. That's contextualization. That's not changing anything in the doctrine, in the doctrine and the core beliefs or anything like that.
Indeed, bro. Indeed. Um, yeah. So it looks like Sutek, he said, let's backtrack though. So the brother said there's evidence for Christianity in West Africa pre-Portuguese. Uh, was that BK or was that B Watch that said that?
Well,
If
I know
any,
I said it. I think BK said BK may have alluded to it as well too, but I know I said it.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. So go ahead and talk about the evidence for that.
yeah, you can find a great book to look at is um, it's called it's written by Joseph Hunt in the 1980s. It's called The Catholic Church in Tropical West Africa. I mean Tropical Africa. I'm sorry. And particularly chapter 5, it begins by saying, literally the first chapter says that Christianity in West Africa predates the Portuguese. And in fact, it says the three sources would be of Christian West Africa in the tropical regions will be the North Africans, Nubian Christianity, and then later European Christianity. And so he goes to detail in chapter 5, especially the different areas in West Africa that were documented as having uh, Christians. And he has source material to each one. A lot of the stuff I've been able to kind of find his sources and read through them to verify it. And I'm still doing it because it's a lot of material. But then you look at the work like Dr. Salim Faji, Dr. Ben Bantu, and follow their work as well too, and they have the same conclusions as Dr. I'm sorry, Professor Joseph in the 1980s. And unfortunately, book wasn't in a wide publication because again, there was no motivation to show Christianity in West Africa for obvious reasons. Because again, why would you want to show that on a global scale? But these sources do exist. I've talked about it on this channel before. I've posted about it in many back chats, and I'll continue to do so. You know, if brothers have questions, I'm pretty sure we in the same few back chats, so we can kind of link up and talk about it. Or one day I'll do a full presentation on it once I get all my information, because I don't want to present anything. I don't want to present anything without a stone unturned yet. Y'all brothers know I'm always bringing out new information, not back check. So
Yeah,
as I continue to bring it, then I'll present it. Then one day I'll do a full presentation. But again, if brothers want to talk about it, we could definitely talk about it. The different social theories, not that big a deal.
indeed, bro. Indeed, bro. So,
No, I
uh,
have. I'm sorry. I'm just reading his thing. I have primaries. I use Joseph is a secondary source. He's reporting on the primaries, but he cites the sources. So I just follow up the prime sources that he cited as the primaries, so I can have them and read it for myself.
yes, sir. Good stuff. Good stuff. So, man, yeah. So, were we going to get into the next topic, or are we good here?
I'm
I
good. I'm
think
good. I'm
I
good.
think yeah, I was gonna say that too. I think what would be, I think we could possibly do a follow up or part two to this, and bring some more stuff out about the claims of the conscious community about our ancestors on the plantation and our ancestors on the continent and their encounters with Christianity, and what that consisted of, and the fact that, well, I think we established the point that our ancestors on the plantation were definitely not these dumb, docile, easily indoctrinated people that they are made out to be by certain members of the conscious community. And I think BWASH and BK, for the most part, they, brought out the the fact that West Africans were Christian prior to encountering the Portuguese, and subsequently prior to the slave trade. So um, I do think a part two would be necessary, just to maybe kind of bring out more as far as the narratives of our ancestors on the on the American plantation. Marcus Garvey, his view on Christianity, and the way that he pushed for the progression of Black people over here in America, and things related to that.
Indeed, man. Yeah, yeah. So that's dope. That's dope. I think one thing you talked about, Jerome, a little bit further back in the discussion uh, was sort of the conscious community, and what they're actually doing to actually help Black people. Um, and and um, I think that a lot of people are doing things. I think that the keyboard warriors, I think that's where the issues are. And then a lot of people that just spend a lot of their time online. Um, but also, like, I think the biggest reason why we don't see some people doing stuff is because it's just not popular to, right? So, like, I'll give you Elisha Taylor, for example. You know what I'm saying? Um, so Eli, man, like he was doing some uh, financial literacy stuff. Like you would see it every now and then, but it just wouldn't get no views. You know what I'm saying? But then he started banging on Christianity, and that's what gets the views. And I think like that's super consistent across the board. Is that a lot of people just aren't interested in in the talk. Once you carve out a lane of like, this is what we're talking about, I'm going to talk about. that's what you're known for. That's what people want to hear from you. So I think that we've sort of what we've sort of seen is like people who gravitate towards the talk don't typically have, you know, the talk and also the practice behind it. You know what I'm saying? And empowering Black people.
If I may, I could really speak to what Thomas just said. I've had shows with the brother, the Hood Scholar, talking about black male trauma and how we have to navigate through things that our counterparts in other ethnic groups just don't. And I think we probably had 2 people in the chat at the highest. So I had a young brother named Isaiah Bomber on talking about Black fathers stepping up and you know, being there for their children, and you know
Good show.
what his organization, you know, had going on. I think we may have had 4 people in the chat. It didn't crack 10 for sure. And so but let me come on and me and Cap yelling at each other, or I'm banging with one of y'all, and I'm gonna have between 10 and 15 people in here. So that's just what moved the needle for whatever reason. But for me, when I get the opportunity to do those type of shows, and me and the brother Andre Boyce gonna be doing a lot of videos talking about financial literacy. Monica Lamb, same thing. She do it on Wednesday. She don't get the views, but she stay dedicated to the cause. So I think when people are actually serious about it, like Monica is, they gonna keep doing it regardless if they get 3 views or if they get 3,000. It's the people who looking for an angle and trying to become the next Shaka Almos and the next Polite and the next these personalities is the ones who looking to get so many views based on what it is they saying. And so yeah, they'll switch it up quick or stay away from that content when it don't get that many looks. But as long as brothers like Isaiah and Dr. Travis want to come on, I'm gonna have them on. But you know, my channel's small anyway, so I got that luxury. I don't eat off this, but for the people who do, you can kind of understand why they trying to keep it in a particular lane, because this is what they eat off of. So I hope that makes sense.
Oh yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I think there's a bit of like what comes with that though is, you know, you sort of sacrifice a little bit of, you know, the real education that you could be bringing to people. And I get it. Like, you know, I ain't trying to get in nobody's pockets. Because I mean, once you something out and once it's successful, like, hey, like that's where your bag is, you know what I'm saying? Go ahead and go with it. And that was,
and you know,
more or less, that was a jab to the people. That was a jab to the people who like egg that stuff on, but won't support in any other type of way, in any other type of content that somebody's producing. Because that Black Fathers conversation was dope. Like I really enjoy, you know what I'm saying, when P's talking about, you know, mental health and stuff like that too. Go ahead, Jerome. My bad.
oh yeah, I was gonna say, man, I'm actually glad y'all 2 brought that point out. And you know, my contention is not against everybody in the conscious community.
Yeah.
Because I know that there are brothers and sisters out there that are truly in it to foster change in the Black community and to push the Black community forward. The only difference that I see is the brothers and sisters that are actually doing work are not the same ones that are disrespecting people like Dr. King, Malcolm X, and Marcus Garvey, like I mentioned earlier. They actually uphold and respect, you know, those 3 individuals because of their sacrifices and the foundation that they laid for us in contemporary times to even do any sort of work in that regard, you know.
Mm. Yeah.
Hey, yeah, can I address something real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I'm kind of glancing back there, and forgive me, I'm in here trying to finish baking this cake for my wife's birthday, for my wife's birthday. But for my daughter. So yeah, here's some background there. But we you know, I keep hearing about things were addressed about the Christianity with West Africa thing, especially uh I think back into a year or so ago when Adam Coleman did a video about it, really talking about what Dr. Bantu brought out about it, especially the corpus of West Africa, medieval West Africa, with Mansa Musa and et cetera, et cetera. And so one of I saw the response video, and I actually brought it to Bianca's attention a while back. We just never had a chance to really address it. And the video has some good points, but I think it was glaring in one thing. Because there's the brackets SIC to seek, where it says Christian, which typically means that the original text did not have uh, this wording, and which is true. It did not have Christian in the text. But if you talk to someone who translates medieval West African Arabic, luckily for me, I'm able to have a direct contact and talk with Dr. Bantu, who does. He showed me the primary source in Arabic, with no parentheses in or anything. And it says Nazar 9. I'm sorry, Nazar 9. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. I don't speak Arabic, but Nazar 9 was a term used by uh, a lot of people who spoke Arabic to denote Christians in particular. Not just people who were infidels, but in particular, it was to denote Christians. You look at a lot of West African literature in Arabic, a lot of Arabic literature, period, you see that term being associated with talking about directly Christian. And so, again, this is more of a case of playing words with friends, because we're looking for an English ch, Christian term, even in Arabic, when, as you brothers know, in the ancient world, the medieval world, everybody used the term Christian. There were different terminologies that you would use: Nazari, Nazarni, Nazarene, Nazarene in some cases, followers of the way, the Jinjao, uh, a number of different terminologies in different languages, but they knew exactly who they were associated with talking about. And so this is one of the instances that I would say that, again, that's why you have to kind of go deeper than just the kind of surface level rebuttal to see, okay, what is the original language stating, and then what is in this semantic domain, what is primarily the usage of this term. And so, again, we can always talk about primary sources, because I read the brother asked me about it. Again, if I'm not mistaken, I think we're in like one or two different back checks, so you can easily just ask me, and we can have that conversation. Because again, you brothers know that I brought it out more times before too, as well as Bianchi, BK, and others. So it's just at me, not in a disrespectful way. Again, I'm just saying, just at me. We can ask and just kind of walk through and see what we come through. And that's all.
Okay, cool. And I think this is a good note to end the show on. Unless anybody has any final thoughts.
Yeah, no, I thought that was dope. Yeah, I think, like I said, I definitely definitely looks like Sutek definitely wants to have a conversation with B Wash on that. So maybe y'all two can get together and do something on his channel. I think that'd be good. Uh, so yeah,
Yeah,
we can,
yeah, that'll be fine.
yeah.
That'll be fine.
So get in
Um,
contact. Y'all in the back chat together anywhere?
I think we are, if I'm not mistaken. If not, I can ask Titty or Bianchi.
All right. Check the private chat real quick.
But like I say, it's well, as we wrapping up, the whole only thing I can say is hold on one second. Sorry, I was reading back chat. Um, one of the things I would say as we close out is that this discussion is not about making someone Christian, right? I'm trying to make someone be a Christian. It was really just about addressing historical truths and letting the ancestors speak for themselves. You can still evaluate. You do not have to follow what your ancestors did or not, but at least put on respect and name of what they did and didn't do.
Yep, I agree. I agree, man.
Indeed, indeed. All right, so yeah, looks like DMG's out. But yeah, so man, listen, I appreciate your brothers. I appreciate the chat. Definitely had some good feedback there, some good questions, some good interjections and stuff to respond to. So man, I definitely think this was a good conversation. Definitely wasn't an echo chamber. QB, if you have a question, man, just throw it in the chat. I know you long winded, you trying to be on all day, and I'm not. Facts.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's cool. Like I said, it, we can always this isn't y'all know me. I'm not one to try to like shame anybody or try to battle for likes or anything like that. Even if we gotta have private or back check conversations and then bring that out to a discussion, that's cool too. I'm not about that or just all this other stuff. It's really just about making sure that we can address information, and then what we do is just kind of think about what the information that we have and wrestle with it. Don't mean you have to agree with it. Again, I can big up Mansa Musa. He was a Muslim. I'm not a Muslim. I don't believe in Islam. I don't believe it's true. But I'm still would big up Mansa Musa and the Ghana Empire, the Songhai Empire, the Mali Empire, the Moorish occupation of Spain. I would big up all that. I don't have a problem with it. Even with me disagreeing with a lot of people who were also my ancestors, right? Being from West Africa, and say I don't agree with Islam, but I can big up and respect their decision and big up their achievements and know a lot of the stuff that they attributed to their faith belief.
Yeah,
That's it.
indeed. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
I like to respect all your ancestors, not just the ones that didn't come over here, and or not the ones that you know what I mean. I'm tired. Right, y'all. So yeah, man. Any last words outside of that?
Uh, like I said, at the beginning, it's good to be back on Paradigm TV 314. I enjoyed the dialogue with y'all brothers. Shout out to BK for hopping on, and shout out to DMG as always.
Indeed, indeed. All right, y'all. Peace. I'm out.
Peace, peace.
Like to the point we couldn't even walk down the hallway.